Okay, well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the Indigenous Parenting series. Before we get started, our Xpey Wellness team would like to begin by acknowledging and honoring the diverse Coast Salish nations that we work with and whose territory we reside in. And our team is made up of a diverse group of people with roots and ancestries in different nations and cultures. And so when we show up to do this work, we are just acknowledging that we're showing up within these communities as guests. And so my name is Harley. I'm part of the Xpey Wellness team, along with Bianca Elliott and Marco Caffiero. And today, Jessie Newman has joined us again. She's going to be sharing about pregnancy and postnatal nutrition. And Jessie's an Indigenous Health Dietitian, and I'm sure she'll share more about herself once we get there. So if you do have questions throughout all of this, please feel free. It's a really casual environment, so you can unmute yourself or you can type them in the chat and ask them. You don't have to wait till the end, but you can if you want to. And we are recording right now, but at the end of the presentation, we stop recording. And so it just kind of gives people the free space to ask questions or share any stories that they would like to. And then we also do have door prizes. So how we've been doing that in the past is if you have questions, ask them, and then at the end we'll have Jessie pick her favorite question, and that's how we will allocate the door prizes. So I think that's it. I will pass it over to Jessie now to start.
Cool, thank you, Harley. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jessie Newman. As Harley said, I work as the Indigenous Health Dietitian with Island Health on the North Island. And I'm zooming in today from the homelands of the Likwila speaking peoples, the Wewakai and the Wewakam. And I'm going to be talking about pregnancy and postpartum nutrition. And I would say there's so much to this, and it was kind of difficult to put this presentation together. And I really, really hope that you do have some questions. It looks like it's a small group, and I would be happy to answer any questions at any time, because there is a lot to this. Like you would think it could be quite easy, but there are definitely some foods that you want to avoid and some foods that you want to focus on. So yeah, and Bianca and her team really wanted to create this space for us to share and learn from each other. So I haven't been on my own pregnancy journey, and so I don't have experience in that, but if you do have a question about maybe some foods, maybe somebody else who has been on a pregnancy journey can help you with that, and I can help you more with like the nutrition aspect, like what the science says, what the evidence says, and what's related to best outcomes. And I'm just realizing that I didn't properly introduce myself. I'm from Skidegate on Haida Gwaii. I'm Haida, Heiltsuk and Kwakwaka'wakw. And so I live in Campbell River, and I work on the North Island, basically up to Port Hardy. And so if you do have questions outside of this, after this, I would be happy to answer them, and I'll share my email. But you could also connect with another healthcare provider, like maybe you have a dietitian in your community, a nurse would probably be able to help, or a doctor, but dietitian would probably be your best bet around this. So, so to start, let's see. I created a little bit of an outline, and so I'm going to try to go through like the stages of pregnancy. So I'll talk a little bit about like preconception, and then I'll go into pregnancy and try to go through the three, like the trimesters, and then I'll talk a little bit about postpartum nutrition, and so that will be like lactation, and we'll just talk about elevated energy requirements and stuff like that. And I'm just having a little bit of trouble advancing the slides, so let's see. Hey, you guys, why do you think that the slides might not be advancing?
You might have to.
Any thoughts?
You have a function on your keyboard to change them, like the space bar or.
Oh, I've never used the space bar. Okay, cool, that works, thanks. Yeah, so like I said, we'll go through the stages. There are some nutrients of concern that we really want to pay special attention to. And then there are some foods to avoid, like foods that could cause harm in the fetus. And so prior to pregnancy, the most important tip is, are you taking a folic acid supplement? And this should be for any woman who's of childbearing age, because I'm pretty sure like the statistics say about like half of pregnancies are unplanned, and you really want to be taking a folic acid supplement prior to getting pregnant. And so like my best tip for everybody is to really make sure that you're getting folic acid every day, whether you're taking like folic acid on its own or folic acid in a multivitamin. And so some of the guidelines that Health Canada has put forward is that all women should be taking 0.4 milligrams of folic acid daily. And so, like I said, up to 2 to 3 months prior to pregnancy. And the guidelines around this are to help prevent any sort of neural tube defects. That's the big thought around this. That's what we want to prevent. And then so women who are at moderate to high risk for having a baby that might have a neural tube defect are advised to take a bit more, and that's 1 to 4 milligrams daily, at least 3 months prior to conceiving. And so you would know if you were at moderate to high risk for having a child with a neural tube defect, if you personally have had a neural tube defect, or if there's a family history, or if you have given birth to another child with a neural tube defect. And so you want to take that elevated amount of folic acid 3 months prior to conceiving and until 12 weeks gestational age. And then after this, you can lower the amount for the rest of pregnancy and for the postpartum period. And the postpartum period is generally defined as 12 weeks after giving birth, or sometimes up to 6 months. And then so pregnancy, I'm sure you all heard that that saying that you're eating for two now, but that's not really the case. Definitely towards the end of your pregnancy, there will be elevated requirements for energy or calories, and I'll speak a little bit to that. But for the first trimester, you actually don't need to be eating any extra food, and it's just in the second and the third trimester that you want to be like taking in a little bit more. And it's actually, the guidelines are only about 300 to 450-ish calories per day. And so that's not much. Like in terms, that's kind of like an extra snack or two, depending on what you're eating. So that could be like a banana and a glass of milk, or like toast and yogurt. Like it's not that much extra calories. There will be elevated needs for protein as well. Like you would want to be getting about 70 grams of protein per day, and that's pretty high. And if you're a vegetarian, that could be quite difficult to get. But that would be like maybe 2 to 3 servings of meat in a day. But most foods do have protein in them as well. So I mean, you definitely could get it through your diet. Like if you were a vegetarian, you would have to plan it quite carefully. And in that case, I would say definitely work with a dietitian to make sure that you are getting those higher levels of protein in your diet. And so the rationale behind this is that you know, around these special nutrients and more energy is that your body is really working to create more red blood cells to do the work of creating a baby. And so there are nutrients that aid in building red blood cells, and those include folic acid, which we've discussed, and then iron, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about these as well. Protein is going to help with that. And then I'm going to speak a little bit to omega-3 fatty acids and choline, calcium and vitamin D for like building strong bones. And the thing is that your body will put preference on the fetus. So if you're not getting enough of these nutrients, you could become depleted in them and possibly.
Hey, Jessie, you're muted right now.
How long was I unmuted for?
Maybe like 5-10 seconds.
Oh, okay. What was the last thing that you heard?
I can't remember.
Okay. Okay. So I was talking about the elevated needs of pregnancy. And so if you're not getting enough of certain nutrients, your body puts preference on the baby. And so you could become depleted in certain nutrients, or your baby could possibly become depleted in certain nutrients. So it's really important to focus on specific nutrients, and we will discuss those in just a moment. So again, if you have questions at any time, please ask. I know it's a lot to consider.
Jessie, there is a question here. So it says, do you have to lower the amount of folic acid after 12 weeks? Would it negatively affect it to just keep taking the same prenatal vitamin?
No, it wouldn't negatively affect. You only would lower it if like if you were, like I said, trying to go back. But so in that guideline, it said you only take a higher amount of folic acid if you have a moderate to high risk of a neural tube defect. And in that case, you would be taking 1 to 4 milligrams, and then lower that after, I believe, 12 weeks of gestation. So can you repeat the question again, Harley? I just want to make sure that I'm answering it right.
So do you have to lower the amount of folic acid after 12 weeks?
Yeah, that's the guideline, is to lower it after 12 weeks if you're taking that elevated amount of folic acid based on you having a moderate to high risk of a neural tube defect. If you have a low risk of a neural tube defect, then you're just going to take that 0.4 milligrams throughout all of pregnancy, prior to pregnancy, after pregnancy. So it's only if you're taking that elevated amount, then you could lower it after to 0.4 to 1 milligrams of folic acid. So there's no need to take the higher dose of folic acid throughout pregnancy. Did I answer that, Harley?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, now the spacebar thing's not working. What do you think will help with this, Bianca? Maybe my screen? I'm not frozen.
Maybe if you minimize it and then try doing the presentation again? There. Do the arrows work?
No. Does anybody else have any tips on this? Anybody listening?
What, man? Why are we're having like Zoom difficulties in the last month?
Okay, I'm gonna try go to end show, or let's see. Oh, okay, well that's, I don't know what's up, but I might have to like manually do that each time. But so when I say folic acid, I mean a supplement, and when it's found naturally in food, it's folate. And so folate is really involved in helping to produce red blood cells, and so that's why it's so important, and also in preventing neural tube defects. And so these are some foods that are higher in folate, and you really want to, you know, focus on these throughout pregnancy. But like what will really determine the folic acid concentration in your body is whether or not you're taking a supplement. That's going to have a greater bearing on your folic acid status than the amount of food, of folate that you eat in your diet. So that's why it's so important to get that 0.4 milligrams of folic acid each day. And I just want to make a note that if you're following a really like strict gluten-free diet, you want to pay special attention, because most foods that are gluten-free are not fortified with folic acid. I believe cornmeal is the only fortified food, grain type food that's really fortified in Canada. And so just pay special attention to that, especially if you're not so I would say, like, if you're following a strict gluten-free diet, very important to be taking that folic acid. So important. And then, let's see. So iron as well, I mentioned. So again, your body is making more red blood cells so that it can transport nutrients and oxygen throughout your body to help build that fetus. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And so you really need to focus on iron. And so that can be through foods and supplements. Health Canada recommends taking a supplement that contains 16 to 20 milligrams of iron per day. And most prenatal vitamins will have that, and usually more too, I would say. And we mentioned this last time that some of these are usually covered so by First Nations health authorities. So definitely no reason to go without, I would say. And I find a lot of women tend to have problems with iron supplements, like causing constipation or stomach upset. And there are certain types of iron that are a little bit more like gentle on your stomach. And so that one in the corner there, it's called ferrous gluconate, and it tends to be sometimes a little bit more expensive, and you would have to get it. It's usually not included in a multivitamin. They tend to use different types in the multis. So if you are having difficulties with your prenatal vitamins or whatever sort of iron supplement you're taking, I would try this type, because it definitely tends to be a little bit more gentle for women. But I've seen it in Walmart for like, I think $8 or something. And so I would definitely want, I mean, it's so important. I would really want you to try and find an iron supplement that you could tolerate. So Very important, above all else, that you're taking an iron supplement. And so these are some food sources of iron. There's, meat tends to be really high in iron, so like deer, salmon, chicken, any type of poultry. And then if you're a vegetarian, like legumes tend to be high in iron, not so much, but a good source of iron. And so I would say, like, if you are a vegetarian, definitely try and work with a dietitian to maximize the amount of iron that you're getting, and really focus on getting a good supplement that you can handle throughout pregnancy. And then clams as well are a really high source of iron, especially if they're the baby clams. Those tend to be one of the highest foods in iron. And so there are two different types of iron. There's heme iron, and that's found in animals. And there's non-heme iron, and those are found in plant and dairy foods. And so the heme iron is much, much more readily absorbed by our body than the non-heme iron. And that's the difference. And so that's why if you're a vegetarian, like, it's so important to work on finding those sources of iron in your diet. But there are things that you can do to help increase the absorption of that non-heme iron, and that will be having vitamin C with whatever source of non-heme iron you're eating at that time. That will help to change the structure of the iron, and so it will be better absorbed by your body. So super important. I would say most women have trouble getting the amount of iron that we need in a day through food. And so again, can't stress enough how important it is to get iron and folic acid in the diet. These are probably the two most important nutrients that you could be getting to support your fetus and supporting best outcomes for your baby. And just a note, like, why is it so important? Again, it helps to build red blood cells, carries oxygen and nutrients throughout the body, helps with vision and hearing development, and also brain development and functioning. So this is why it's so important for us. And again, calcium, super important. As you probably can understand, like, you're helping to build the bones in your fetus. And so you might be surprised to know that calcium requirements actually don't go up in pregnancy, but it just becomes more important. And it doesn't go up because our body becomes more efficient at absorbing calcium. It's like, we just know it's so important, and so our body becomes a bit better at absorbing it. And of course, dairy is one of the highest calcium sources in the diet. So that's milk, cheese, yogurt, all very high in calcium. A serving of each of these would provide about 1/3 of the amount of calcium that you want to be getting in a day. But it can be difficult to get the amount that you need in a day, which is 1,000 milligrams. And one serving of these dairy products contains about 300-ish. And so I would advise most women to take a supplement each day. If you don't, especially if you're not getting any dairy, then it's very unlikely that you're going to be getting the amount of calcium that you need in a day. Prenatal vitamins as well will contain calcium. So a prenatal vitamin will contain pretty much everything that you need. So, like, I wouldn't worry too much, but definitely wanted to make a note of this. And so these are some other calcium sources if you're not eating dairy. The ones on the top there are the blackstrap molasses and tahini. And so I had a colleague who would share with women that mixing a mixture of blackstrap molasses and tahini together and putting it on like toast is a really great source of calcium and iron. So two of the most important nutrients that you need in pregnancy, you can get in that. And it's actually pretty tasty. And yeah, I think it's a good way to get your nutrients through food. And so tofu, and then greens as well, like collard greens, kale, spinach, all contain a little bit of calcium, and salmon, if you're eating the bones in that, are also an excellent source of calcium, but definitely difficult to get the calcium that you need if you're not eating any dairy products. So so there you go with that. I mean, it's possible, but it would take a lot of careful planning. And then I just want to add vitamin D here as well, because it's going to help you absorb calcium. And so there aren't that many foods that naturally contain vitamin D. And so Health Canada allows the fortification of like milk and butter and things like that to help elevate that in our diet, because especially living in the north, like pretty much everywhere in Canada, at this latitude, our body isn't able to make vitamin D. It can in the summer, but it just, during these months, we're not able to do it. And so I recommend this for everybody. And then in pregnancy, it just becomes that much more important. So salmon is one of the only natural sources of vitamin D in the diet. And then like soybeans and soy milk, eggs, the yolk contains vitamin D, and then like sardines and mackerel and those types of fatty fishes, and mushrooms as well are a really good source of vitamin D.
Jessie?
Yeah.
So Bianca said stinging nettle is high in iron and calcium. Do you know if it's safe to take during pregnancy, eaten, or for tea?
I don't know. Like, okay, so I do have a list of herbs that are considered safe during pregnancy, and stinging nettle is not on that. But I can quickly look at a list that I have open of herbs, and I'm pretty sure it's not. But I'll double check before the end of this talk. Like, I can open it up.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
I'm pretty sure not, but I will double check. So please remind me.
Okay.
And then omega-3 fatty acids, so important, so important. There's two different types. There's ALA and there's DHA. And so ALA tends to be found in plant sources, canola oil, like flaxseed oil, walnut oil, and then in nuts and seeds, and then of course in fatty fish like salmon or like sardines, those types of foods. The thought though is that our body isn't able to convert ALA to DHA, and so just to backtrack a little bit, like omega-3 fatty acids are considered essential. Like our body can't make them, we need to get them in the diet. And so ALHA is found in plants, and it can be converted to DHA, which is the type of omega-3 fatty acids that we really want to help in brain development. And so DHA is naturally found in like fatty fish and animal type products. And so like I was saying, we don't think that we can make enough DHA from ALA. And so that's why it's really, really important for us to eat those types of fatty fishes during pregnancy. And so Health Canada actually has recommended that all women consume 150 grams of fatty fish each week, and that's 2 servings. And a serving is basically like the palm of your hand, like even in thickness, and that area. It's not a lot, it's about 3 ounces, the 150 grams would probably translate to about like a can of fish, like those smaller cans from the grocery store, or if you're lucky enough to have access to, you know, canned or salmon from your territory, which would be the most amazing thing. It would just be like a few servings like that. So definitely super, super important. And like, yes, you could take a supplement, but we know that eating the fish is much more beneficial to outcomes than taking a supplement. So other than iron and folic acid, I would say that omega-3 fatty acids are so important for the development of your baby, especially their brain and neural tube. So can't stress that enough, like the importance of eating fatty fish twice each week. And so you probably know that mercury is not, you know, it can be hazardous to your baby, can be toxic. And so there are certain fish that are lower in mercury that you could eat freely. And then there are certain types that are really high in mercury and you want to avoid or limit. So looking at this, most canned tuna are safe to eat. And I eat them a lot, and I like them because it's cheap and it's easy. Like one of those small cans can be like $1. But then what you really want to watch out for is like the albacore tuna tends to be much higher in mercury. So I would really, really limit that or just avoid it altogether. And then you can see there like salmon, shrimp and prawns, rainbow trout, Atlantic mackerel, sole. Those are all good. And then the others on that avoid list, you definitely try to limit or avoid. So that's for fish. And then choline, also super, super important. So choline tends to not be included in most prenatal supplements, but you could get it on as a supplement on its own, or you could just focus on getting it in the diet. And so these are some high sources of choline. And choline is important as well for brain development and also for best outcomes in preventing neural tube defects. So egg yolks are an excellent source of choline, as is salmon or any type of fish. Beans, certain types of beans like kidney beans, soybeans are really high in choline. What we call cruciferous vegetables, and so this includes broccoli, cauliflower, like Brussels sprouts, those are all high in choline. Certain nuts like peanuts, and then as well like poultry such as chicken are all really high in choline. And so super important to focus on these foods. And I would say, like, if you were, you know, thinking back over this presentation, there are certain foods that tend to be that I have mentioned like probably a few times, and I would say like eggs, fish, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, vegetables like fruit, and then like lean meats such as chicken or turkey, things like that tend to be really, really great for pregnancy. And then, so there are some don'ts. And so there are some foods that could potentially be contaminated with bacteria, and you want to avoid them pretty much like at all costs. And so these include raw or undercooked meats, like or fish or eggs. So you really want to make sure that all the meat that you consume during your pregnancy is like well done. You don't want to be having raw fish in sushi or anything like that. If you have eggs, you don't want them to be runny. So like no eggs benny, no soft eggs benny. Shellfish like oysters or clams, raw sprouts, unpasteurized juices, raw or unpasteurized dairy products. And so this could include brie or camembert, or some types of blue vein cheeses. And pasteurization, if you don't know, is just a process where the food is exposed to like really high heat, which kills the bacteria. So some juices, like if you get it in a health food store, like if it's just been made, like tends to be unpasteurized. And so usually the label of juices or dairy products will say if it's been pasteurized. So you really want to look out for that. So this is pretty much like those types of fish, and then these types of foods that could potentially be contaminated with bacteria. These are the ones that you really want to avoid. And then as far as herbal teas, we just had that question about stinging nettle, and I will look into that. But these are the only herbal teas that Health Canada deems safe to consume during pregnancy. It's not to say that other herbal teas aren't safe, but we don't have enough evidence to say that they are safe. So it's kind of like, you know, you almost have to make your own decision, but like these definitely are considered safe. So I would say focus on these herbal teas if you're wanting to consume. So ginger, bitter orange, echinacea, peppermint, rosehip, and rosemary are all safe to consume during pregnancy. And then as far as cheeses, like tends to be the hard cheeses. These have been pasteurized. They're safe to consume. Cheddar, Havarti, mozzarella, Monterey Jack, Swiss, Parmesan, cottage cheese, and processed cream cheeses are all safe to consume during pregnancy. Caffeine, you want to limit to 300 milligrams per day. And just to put that in perspective, that could be about 2 cups of coffee per day or about 6 cups of tea per day. I would say the same amount for Coke, like, you know, about maybe 3 cups of Coke. But what caffeine does is it raises your blood pressure and it raises your heart rate, which isn't, you know, it's not great for your developing baby. It's not related to birth defects, but it could, like if you were to, you know, be consuming large amounts of caffeine every day, all day, like it could result in maybe a baby that was low weight, or possibly even it's been associated with miscarriage as well. So definitely want to try and limit your caffeine intake each day. Super important. And then just a note on liver. So you want to limit your consumption to less than a serving a week in your first trimester. And then after this, it can be eaten moderately. So that could be like maybe twice a week, small amount, same, you know, that 1 serving of about 3 ounces of liver. And the rationale behind this is that liver contains very large amounts of vitamin A. And vitamin A in large amounts is associated with birth defects. So very important to limit your liver consumption. And this is mostly, I would say beef liver especially, because it tends to be the highest in vitamin A. So please keep that in mind. And then postpartum, I just kind of gave a very short outline because I wanted to kind of keep this presentation a bit short to allow for a lot of questions. But definitely in lactation, your energy needs are still elevated. And so it's kind of the same guidelines for pregnancy. Like you want to be getting about like maybe 400-ish extra calories a day. And again, that could be like 2 snacks, maybe depending on what you're eating. I think I said earlier, mentioned like a glass of milk and a banana or like yogurt and like a piece of toast with peanut butter or something. It's not a lot. And so again, you increase protein requirement as well. You want your breast milk to have more protein to help your developing baby. Iron requirements go down. The requirements for iron were much higher in pregnancy, again, because you were building those red blood cells, but also you wanted to like create a large store of iron in your baby. And so what that did was it gave your baby pretty much like enough iron to get through about the first 6 months of life until it's able to eat. So your iron requirements are lower, generally because when you're lactating, you're not bleeding. And so they're just, they're not so much. And then you want to increase your water intake as well for breastfeeding. So that's really important. And then I know it can be like, it can seem like a lot. It's a lot of information, but if you were just to follow Canada's food guide and like look at that snapshot of food and am I getting like a good deal of vegetables and fruits? Am I getting like enough protein in the day? Choosing whole grains, choosing water over like sugary drinks and pop, then you'll be doing like quite well for yourself. I know sometimes like money is an issue for people, and so there do tend to be programs in community like Good Food Boxes that you could kind of reach out to, or like the maternal child health programs tend to kind of reach out to you. But there are definitely certain foods that are a bit cheaper that you know, could help facilitate good nutrition during pregnancy. Like eggs tend to be quite cheap. Tuna, I find, tends to be pretty cheap. Peanut butter is a pretty good source of protein. Yeah, those small cans of, or pink salmon as well, like just, you know, still getting those omega-3 fatty acids, but tends to be quite a bit less expensive than like sockeye salmon. As far as omega-3 fatty acids as well, like plant-based sources tend to be quite cheap. So like flaxseed, you could get, you know, like in the bulk bin or whatever, tends to be really cheap. That's a good cheap source of omega-3s. And then like beans and lentils, especially if you're getting them in the bulk aisle, and dried, tend to be very cheap. Like fruits that tend to be a little bit less are like apples, bananas, pears. There definitely are ways that you could eat well and spend less. And so definitely working with a dietitian or somebody in your community could help with that. But there are a lot of good websites too. Like if you were to go to the Canada's Food Guide website, there is a lot of info on like eating for pregnancy and recipes and eating on a budget. So definitely some good ideas there. Like even if you are on a budget, it is possible to still like eat fairly well during pregnancy. So I think that's it for the presentation, just because I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. And I welcome any questions that you have, because I know it's a lot of info and it can be quite overwhelming. So if you want clarification, I would be happy to do that.
Jessie, there was just a question that came up about someone missed the first few minutes. Why would a mom need to take extra folic acid? So Bianca kind of said the higher amount of folic acid would be recommended if you have moderate to high risk of neural tubal defects.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So So the question was, why would you want to take folic acid during pregnancy? Okay, yeah, so that's related to preventing neural tube defects. So important, but also folic acid is involved in red blood cell creation. And so just in the creation of a baby, you know, so much extra work has to happen and you need more red blood cells. So you need elevated levels of folic acid and iron to do that. So it's like red blood cells to do the work and also preventing neural tube defects. So important.
Thank you. And if anyone does have questions, you can type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask them. Maybe, Bianca, did we want to stop recording at this time?
Oh, I just wanted to check in on the stinging nettle.
Oh, yeah.
And see if it was on the list here. Okay, I don't see it. So I would say probably avoid it. Yeah, because there's probably not a lot of evidence to say that it's safe. And so I would just stick to those few that I mentioned in that one slide. Those are definitely safe during pregnancy.